There's something quietly strange about it. If you stop and think, in bedrooms across the world, in hospital waiting rooms, in the arms of nervous children on their first day of school, there sits a small, soft bear with gentle eyes and stitched paws. It represents comfort, safety, warmth. But its name comes from a hunt, from a gun, from a moment in the wilderness where a real bear stood trembling and cornered. How did something born from such tension become the symbol of childhood innocence? Why do we call it a teddy bear? And who was Teddy in the first place? Because the story behind that name isn't just about a toy. It's about power, compassion, and a decision that changed history in the most unexpected way. Welcome back to Simple Things Why and How, where we take the simplest objects in your life and uncover the stories quietly stitched into them. Today, we're unwrapping the history of something so familiar that most of us never question it: the teddy bear. Soft, silent, loyal, a childhood companion that has dried more tears than we could ever count. But its name carries a legacy that reaches far beyond the nursery. To understand why it's called a teddy bear, we have to travel back more than a century, to the early 1900s, to a man whose personality was anything but soft. In 1902, the President of the United States was a man known for his toughness, his booming voice, and his love of the outdoors: Theodore Roosevelt. He was not the kind of leader you would associate with stuffed animals. He was a hunter, a rancher, a man who believed in strength and grit. He carried himself with the energy of someone who thrived in the wild. And that year, during a political trip to Mississippi, he was invited on a bear hunting expedition. Now imagine the scene: dense forest, the sharp scent of pine and earth, hunting dogs barking in the distance. The President of the United States, riding through the woods, rifle in hand, expected to claim a trophy. But what happened next would ripple far beyond that forest. After hours of searching, Roosevelt had not found a bear. His assistants, determined to ensure the president did not leave empty-handed, cornered an old black bear, exhausted, injured, tied to a tree. They called Roosevelt over. All he had to do was pull the trigger, and instead, he refused. To Roosevelt, shooting a helpless, restrained animal was unsportsmanlike, dishonorable. It violated his code. So he lowered his rifle. In a time when displays of dominance were expected, especially from powerful men, this small act of restraint became something remarkable. The story could have ended there, a private decision in the woods. But it didn't. Because someone turned that moment into a cartoon. A political cartoonist named Clifford Berryman illustrated the scene for the Washington Post. In the drawing, Roosevelt stands firmly while a small, wide-eyed bear looks up at him. The bear in the cartoon wasn't fierce. It wasn't dangerous. It was tiny, almost childlike. The image spread quickly across the country, and something about it captured people's hearts. It showed strength paired with mercy, power softened by compassion. And then, in Brooklyn, a small shopkeeper saw that cartoon and had an idea. His name was Morris Mictum. He and his wife ran a humble candy and novelty shop. Inspired by the cartoon, they created a small stuffed bear and placed it in their shop window with a handwritten sign that read, "Teddy's Bear." They used Roosevelt's nickname, Teddy. Now here's something interesting. Roosevelt himself disliked being called Teddy. He preferred Theodore. But the nickname had already taken on a life of its own. Mictum, cautious and respectful, wrote to Roosevelt asking permission to use his name, and Roosevelt agreed. That simple approval transformed a homemade stuffed toy into a national sensation. Teddy's Bear quickly became the Teddy Bear, and orders poured in from across the country. Soon, the Mictums founded what would become the Ideal Toy Company, and the teddy bear began its journey into history. At almost the same time in Germany, a company called Steiff was independently creating jointed stuffed bears that also became wildly popular. Together, these creations sparked a global phenomenon. And here's the beautiful irony. The name came from a moment involving a wild animal tied to a tree in a tense hunting scene. But the toy that carried that name became a symbol of gentleness. Over time, the teddy bear stopped being associated with Roosevelt the hunter and became associated with comfort itself. Children clutched them during thunderstorms. Soldiers carried them as keepsakes during wartime. Hospitals handed them to frightened patients before surgery. The name stayed, but the meaning evolved. It shifted from strength to softness, from wilderness to warmth. And maybe that's what makes the story so powerful. When we ask, why is it called a teddy bear? We're really asking something deeper. How does a moment of compassion echo through history? Roosevelt likely had no idea that refusing to shoot that bear would lead to millions of stuffed animals bearing his nickname. He was simply acting according to his values. But that single decision, captured in ink and imagination, reshaped culture. It reminds us that the smallest choices can leave the longest shadows. And today, when a child hugs a teddy bear at night, they aren't thinking about presidents or political cartoons. They're thinking about comfort. Yet hidden in that softness is a story about restraint, about choosing mercy over ego, about strength that doesn't need to prove itself. That's what makes the name endure. So the next time you see a teddy bear sitting quietly on a shelf or tucked beneath a child's arm, remember that its name was born in a forest more than a century ago, in a moment where power stepped back and compassion stepped forward. If you enjoyed uncovering the story stitched into something so ordinary, give this video a like so more curious minds can discover it too. Share it with someone who still has their childhood teddy bear hidden somewhere safe. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Simple Things Why and How, because the world is full of simple things carrying extraordinary stories. Until next time, stay curious.